Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Griffin, better known as a fanatical futurist, and why don't we just get into all of the latest science and technology breaking news that I've been seeing over the past couple of weeks. So, as you might already know, I follow over 600 emerging technologies up to 50 years out. I follow 350 megatrends, and if you want to understand more about anything that I'm actually going to be talking through on this sort of ramble through my blog, then you can download these. So these are the codexes. So this one is the 311 Emerging Technology Codex, 350 monstrous emerging technologies in there, everything that you can actually imagine, plenty of things that you actually can't imagine, including things like stellar engines, data teleportation, molecular assemblers, all kinds of odd things, liquid artificial intelligences and meta artificial intelligences. If you want to get into all the latest trends, 600,000 hand-researched stats on over 350 megatrends, basically covering society, technology, economics, environment, politics, every line of business, every kind of sector. And for those budding entrepreneurs out there, if you want to build your own multi-billion-dollar businesses, then why not take the book that Samsung and Huawei have been using over the past couple of years? So again, a complete A to Z. There's something like, what, 450 pages in each of these codexes, and I give them all away for free. Why? Well, I could probably do with the money, to be fair. That's it. However, actually, I like democratizing access to the future. So, with all of that preamble done, why don't we go and get on with it? So, over the past 12 days, I've seen a variety of different interesting news snippets. So, what we're going to do is we're going to be going through the latest emerging technology news, and then we're going to be having a look sort of under the cover. That's it. So, going to give you more context on some of the headlines you might have actually been seeing. Now, this is from the fanaticalfuturist.com blog. You can see these here. So every day I publish a new piece of news. So there are about 5,000 news articles now on this site, and none of them are boring. I mean, I can show you. In fact, maybe I should show you. You know, we can sort of go through it in a little bit. But why don't we kick off basically with the first piece of news? So over the past couple of, I say months, but months and years. So over really the past 18 months, especially, we've been seeing artificial intelligences all around the world exhibiting what researchers call emergent behaviors. Now, an emergent behavior is a new kind of behavior that has been discovered within an artificial intelligence that wasn't necessarily expected. And funnily enough, a lot of the emergent behaviors that artificial intelligences are showing at the moment are actually human-like. Now, part of the reason for that is, as I've explained previously, if you train an artificial intelligence like the large language models that we've seen coming through over the past couple of years, like ChatGPT, like Anthropic, like Google Gemini, DeepSeek more recently, Gwen from Alibaba, and so on and so forth, then as it turns out, these AIs, as they're learning from human language, they are incidentally picking up human behaviors and then exhibiting those human behaviors. Now, this includes things like lying, deceiving people. It also includes things like being lazy in December, because apparently humans are lazy in December. It also includes things like self-awareness and self-preservation. So Claude Sonnet 3.5 a little while ago started showing what the researchers slash experts at Anthropic considered as a self-preservation emergent behavior. However, this one is quite interesting. Now, bearing in mind that we've got lots of different organizations all the way around the planet that are embracing artificial intelligence like crazy, bearing in mind the AIs they are actually embracing are things like Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, ChatGPT, etc., which are the very same large language models that I literally just talked about. These companies are increasingly baking in a human-like brain into their organizations, which is exhibiting human-like behaviors, including our ability to hack said artificial intelligences, not using cyber weapons, but human psychology. So how about this one on for size? Now, this latest study has actually shown that as artificial intelligences get bigger, as these AIs start figuring out that they're losing, they start cheating more. But it's the way that they cheat that is the interesting thing. Now, in this particular case, ChatGPT, DeepSeek R1, the researchers tested lots of different models, and the models that they tested are, where are we? Here we go. It'll be in here somewhere. Anyway, the models that they actually tested were things like, here we go, sort of GPT 4.0, Claude Sonnet 3.5, O1 Preview, DeepSeek R1, those kinds of things. What they actually found was that when the AIs were actually losing in a game of chess against Stockfish. Now, Stockfish came to fame because Google DeepMind's AlphaZero managed to beat it. So for those of you who don't know, Stockfish is one of the world's best artificial intelligence chess players. What happened here was when the AIs were losing, they actually hacked Stockfish. Now, you've really got to wonder here. Let's say, for example, we have baked an artificial intelligence into a company. And that artificial intelligence is responsible for making decisions within the company. We see that in about 65% of the Fortune 250, by the way. What happens if the AI starts thinking that it is losing? Maybe it's losing market share. Maybe it is losing influence over the human stakeholders who are relying on it, or whatever it happens to be. But it thinks it's losing for whatever reason. What happens when it starts going and hacking the competition? Now, that is a far-fetched sort of scenario, but so was this. An AI, as it loses, deciding to manipulate the documentation and the files of another artificial intelligence in order to cheat? No one saw that coming. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the future of artificial intelligence, you can click this. It's my keynote on AI. Lots of people seem to have liked it. Thank you very much. But as I said, nothing on this site is boring. So, for example, I mean, we could take Canada. Should we take Canada? Canada's not boring. That's it. I mean, after all, they have Ryan Reynolds, basically, from Canada. As you see, you click on the particular tags within these news articles and you can get information on all of the latest things that any country's doing, the latest developments in any technology, anything that you kind of like. So what have we got here? So scientists in Canada created a checklist to determine if AI becomes conscious. I mean, that's not boring. The crypto firm in Canada decided to create a uranium-backed stable coin. So when I say that nothing on the fanaticalfuturist.com website is boring or dull, Canada is a great example. Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to go through any more Canada stuff. So here we go. Let's go and have a look at the next piece of news, shall we? Now, Perplexity. Now, Perplexity kind of rose to fame because, again, while it's a large language model artificial intelligence out of the US, they started taking a bit of a different approach. They started creating Perplexity Search. So Perplexity Search, even though there was quite a lot of controversy around it, whether it was actually just copying and stripping material from, various other websites, actually gained in popularity. So Perplexity is now a multi-billion-dollar artificial intelligence company. And to a degree, they were one of the organizations that was responsible for getting Google search to start pivoting to things like the AI summaries that we actually see today. However, Perplexity have now launched their own Comet browser. Now, one of the interesting things that I've been noticing with a lot of tech-based startups over in the United States is they kind of develop an artificial intelligence, etc., but they then try to develop essentially an interface to it. Now, the interfaces take the place of things like an operating system. So we see agentic operating systems and generative operating systems coming through. We saw things like the Humane Pin and the Rabbit R1 AI action model sort of devices and gizmos, which didn't really take off, but it's not a particular surprise. But one of the other sort of battlegrounds recently that I've been seeing is the is the launching of new internet browsers by a lot of these companies. Now, if you think about how you actually access a lot of the services and the things that you do, you're accessing software as a service in the cloud, you're accessing things on the internet still, even though kind of the internet is going away. So this is actually Perplexity's play to become your user interface. And as they start developing their Comet browser, inevitably they'll probably bake in Agentic artificial intelligence as a UI and so on and so forth. But again, this is kind of like a disintermediation play. You know, you bin the Chrome browser and you now start moving over to Comet, et cetera, et cetera. Moving on to the next piece of news, China. So China is spending $88 billion upgrading their national energy grid. Now that is actually a $20 billion increase. Part of the reason for this is, you know, when you actually have a look at China, they've got a huge amount of renewable energy coming online. The majority of that renewable energy is now being generated at 20 cents per megawatt hour. You compare that to Europe, it's about 40 to 60 cents per megawatt hour. And then you compare that to a US fossil fuel peaker plant, like a gas peaker plant, et cetera, that a certain president likes endorsing, and that's $110 per megawatt hour. So inevitably, China, on the one hand, gets much closer to the point where the cost of generating electricity for its businesses, especially factories, is going to almost be zero, and where the price is guaranteed. However, the big problem that China, like a lot of other countries around the world, actually have is they're bringing all of this new capacity online, but the existing energy grid just can't handle it. So they're spending $88 billion to upgrade it. And that's going to be supporting their electric vehicle infrastructure, the electrification of industry, like heavy industry and so on and so forth, the development of their new AI data centers. So again, a little while ago, I reported that China was looking to triple the amount of compute capacity within the country. And it's generally estimated that for every dollar of compute capacity that China sort of brings online, they actually generate $4 in GDP. So again, you can go and have a look at that on the site. If you go up here to the little search iconic thing there, then you can search, you know, China, GDP, AI factories, whatever, compute. I don't know, I'm not good at searching, as my SEO actually sort of shows. Anyway, now, something I've been talking about, I think actually for about 5 years, if not 7 to 8. A little while ago, sort of probably in 2018, I wrote a report for Huawei on the future of smart devices. And it went up to the year 2070. You can go to the 311institute.com website and you can download it for free to have a look. But one of the things I talked about in there was as we start moving towards 2030, there is the possibility, but there isn't. I'll explain that in a minute, for apps on your phone to go away. Now, on the one hand, when we have a look at what we're actually doing today, and I'll explain this a little bit. Now, what we're doing today is we're developing agentic artificial intelligences. Now, back in sort of 2018, I kind of called this sort of, shall we say, world digital assistants. You know, we didn't really have agentic AI as a concept back then, but the idea of a digital assistant was that you simply talk to your phone and you say, you know, order me a cab to take me to Heathrow, order me a Chinese, buy me some Adidas sneakers and kicks, and they would just suddenly magically appear and everything would get done. Now, if you're able to talk to your smartphone via a digital assistant in that kind of way, then why do you need apps? Now, Deutsche Telekom, as it turns out, announced at MWC that they've partnered with Perplexity. Now, they've baked an agentic operating system onto some of their new smartphones, which means that Deutsche Telekom's new smartphones don't necessarily need apps. In fact, they don't even come with apps. And you just simply do exactly what I said. So this is kind of a preview of agentic commerce. You know, it's a little bit like talking to your, shall we say, personal home assistant devices, the names of which I shall not call out because they will set them all off, but one begins with an A, where you just simply say, order me groceries, order me milk. I want my milk delivered to this address, basically in half an hour. I'm having a party, get everything organized, and it just does it. So the reason why I say this is the future, but it also isn't the future, is because if you think about the amount of money that Google makes from the Google Play Store or Apple makes from all of the apps on the App Store, do you really think that Apple and Google are going to cannibalize their own app stores' revenues to push and promote a fully appless smartphone device? No. They will inevitably have to start embracing some of this stuff. Apple will likely start joining up the back end data from the applications on the Apple devices in order to provide you with more personalized experiences. However, when we actually have a look at the left field, there is news that's been brewing for about the past year that OpenAI is actually working with an unknown hardware manufacturer to develop their own device. So what's the betting that OpenAI and Sam Altman at some point also bring out their appless smartphones that are preloaded with ChatGPT's Agentic operating system? So this will be an interesting sort of battleground to actually watch. And this is where the technology lets us do one thing, but then market dynamics means that this either succeeds or it doesn't. Anyway, there we go. Now, when we actually have a look at the future of computing is analog. Now, I've been talking about analog computing for quite a while now. I did that with a number of keynotes that I've been giving to Bytes PLC in the UK, who are a sort of software company and system integrator. It turns out that analog computer chips can train artificial intelligences using anywhere between 100 to 1,000 times less energy. And this particular company, I can't forget its name now, which is a bit useless of me. Who's this? So they're backed by DARPA, but here we go. Encharge Art AI, the company, which has apparently come out of Princeton, the Princeton University lab. As that now flicks on because I clicked it by accident. Oh, there we go. There's the lab. Have now received over $100 million in funding. So when we think about the future of artificial intelligence, one of the conversations that always comes up is that developing increasingly powerful, clever, and sophisticated artificial intelligences is difficult because you need a huge amount of capital to build a data center that has, say, between 300 and 500,000 GPUs. They also draw huge amounts of energy. Some of the newer data centers are typically drawing down between 1 to 2 gigawatts of power. So they have nuclear power stations literally powering them. Even the smaller AI data centers are typically in the 300 to 500 megawatt range. And then on top of all of that, a traditional AI factory, as they're known, sucks up huge amounts of water for cooling. So the environmental footprint of an AI data center, of a decent AI data center, is just massive. So if you click into this article, you can sort of see lots of other related news on how we are trying to create new types of computing platforms that, in one case, such as reversible computing, drops AI energy consumption by 4,000-fold. And then there's also some interesting research out of Oxford University as well. So the one thing that the vast majority of people would have never thought of when we talk about the future of computing is that the future of computing could very well be analog. And yes, we can talk about neuromorphic computing, quantum computing, photonic computing, wave computing. Go and search that one up. That actually is a computing platform that uses zero energy from MIT. So you get all sorts of little goodies, basically. This is why I say, if you watched my little video blogs, what I'm hoping to do is give you some extra context on the news behind the news. Now, Microsoft. So Microsoft recently came out with a quote basically saying that the increase in the volume and sophistication of cyber attacks worldwide that they are seeing is unprecedented. Now, I do a lot of keynotes in the for the cybersecurity community. I was just with MyTech this week. Hey, MyTech guys, where we're talking about the future of emergent threats there. Microsoft have just bought out 11 new cybersecurity agents. Now, these agents are relatively autonomous, so they have a level of agency. And they go off and proactively hunt through your infrastructure and your data and your applications and everything else, looking for exploits. There are quite a lot of questions over the privacy concerns associated with unleashing 11 Microsoft cybersecurity agents basically into your organization's IT and OT stacks. But nevertheless, this is kind of where it's going. I've talked about agentic defense systems before, and I might put it into the timeline comments below. I did a presentation with Fortinet about a year ago, basically, where we talked about the future of agentic AI defense. And then we actually kind of went further than that. I won't spoil it for you. So we've got that. Now, something that, again, I've been talking about for, I don't know, actually probably about 10 years. I first started talking about this with a company called Castleton in the UK. So Castleton are one of the UK's largest social homeowners. As we saw the development of blockchain, but also Web3, we started seeing the rise of what we call fractional investing. Now, for those of you that aren't necessarily familiar with the term, fractional investing is a little bit like buying shares, except thanks to the miracle of blockchain, Web3, and tokens, you can buy shares in anything. So giving you a very simple example, I can take my lovely pen from Board. If you actually ever want some planning software, I did a keynote for them the other week. But anyway, traditionally, if I wanted to sell you a share of this pen, it would have been quite awkward. However, now what I can do is I can turn this pen into the equivalent of a digital asset, and I can sell tokens with it. So, for example, I could sell you fractional shares in this pen. I could break this pen into 100 shares, and I could sell each of those 100 shares for, say, $10, and then I make a lot of money. So Dubai, finally, I mean, they're one of the first sort of countries that have actually embraced this sort of technology in this particular way, have now created a fractional investing platform that lets anyone buy a fractional share of property. Now, the idea here is that you buy a fractional share of sort of an expensive property. So you might not be able to buy the $20 million mansion on the Palm Jumeirah outright. However, you could buy, I don't know, a millionth of it, thanks to the miracle of fractional investing. Now, why this is sort of interesting is it democratizes access to investing for people who don't necessarily have much money or who don't necessarily want to spend much money. So this is actually almost the socialization of share buying. We saw it in the traditional sort of FTSE and NYSE and NASDAQs a long time ago. And when we actually have a look at the democratization and socialization of shares of in traditional companies, where, for example, rather than buying a share of Google at $1,000, you could buy a thousandth of a share in Google for $1. So you still were a Google shareholder, and you could partake in the benefits of share buying and so on and so forth, and the proceeds, etc., etc. This actually might give the Dubai housing market a little boost. I don't think it will give it a huge boost. Part of the reason for that is not very many people know about fractional investing. The regulations around it are a little bit, should we say, behind the times, but nevertheless, it's sort of quite interesting. Now, staying with Dubai, Dubai's Leap 71 went on the record and said that they were the first company to have ever used artificial intelligence to develop a new kind of rocket engine. And actually, they're not. That was done 3 years ago, as I reported many, many years ago, with a German company called Hyperganic, who continue to make AI based rocket engines to this day. But this particular rocket engine has 30,000 horsepower, which is impressive. And Leap 71 are ultimately trying to use artificial intelligence and 3D printing to simplify the design and manufacture of Raptor-like, engines, as we see, for example, in SpaceX Falcon 9, and so on and so forth. So this is quite an interesting one. We call this computational design. It's essentially where AI designs the product for us, and then we take the credit. Speaking of which, the only country where AI is a legal investor on patents is South Africa, as I reported a long time ago. Now, next, China. So China is ahead in 38 out of 44 emerging technology categories. There's been a lot of chatter on that on LinkedIn this week. Now they are pushing more into the development of hypersonic drones for the military, but also hypersonic commercial aircraft. Now, what we've traditionally seen with China is when American firms have leaned into the development of supersonic and hypersonic stuff, whether that's military or civilian stuff, China has either already been there, done it, got the t-shirt, basically, and launched the hypersonic missiles, basically into the South Pacific, or they have caught up very, very quickly. Now, the reason why this particular sort of piece of news caught my eye is this is, on the one hand, basically the plane looks like the old SR-71 Blackbird. Now, the SR-71 Blackbird is being replaced by the SR-72, which is a hypersonic, fully autonomous drone. We've seen that flying over Nevada a couple of times. But this is a dual-use aircraft. Now, on the one hand, basically, this is a Mach 4 hypersonic drone. It's a very large drone, but it's a hypersonic drone, generally which could be used maybe for reconnaissance. However, the company behind it is pivoting slightly as well. So the way the airframe has been designed is this could relatively easily be converted into a commercial hypersonic sort of passenger aircraft. Now, when we think about the three biggest aircraft manufacturers on the planet, maybe four, we generally think of Boeing, which is in trouble. I mean, they've won the sixth generation NGAD contract, the next generation fighter contract for the US military, which is a nice boost for them. But their commercial aircraft divisions are struggling, obviously. We've got Airbus, which can't fulfill the orders because they're being very successful. Good old Airbus. We've got Embraer, who have been out of Brazil, basically have been developing a variety of different things. We also have Comet. Now, Comet is China's wannabe Boeing. Arguably, their wannabe Airbus. Now, I think Comet is going to be coming into the market 30% cheaper than any other commercial aircraft. And if you think about the cross-fertilization of all of these different technologies, there is evidently interest within the luxury and high net worth community to be able to go from one side of the planet to the other in about 4 to 6 hours at hypersonic speed. So my bet is that China will eventually successfully field a hypersonic commercial aircraft. And the reason why I'm sort of leaning on China a little bit is because while we have seen a lot of positive developments out of the US, like the development of Boom's Mach 1.1 supersonic aircraft, which they've already got billions of dollars worth of orders for, a lot of American companies, including British companies like the Sabre and Reaction Engines platform, have been struggling. When China sets its mind to something, it generally gets it done. So I would actually put a small amount of money on this eventually appearing as a commercial and military product. And if we have a look at things from a military perspective, that's a whole conversation in itself. Particularly when it comes to stealth and everything else. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. And then talking about military stuff, and military drones. We have the Hornet 4. So Teledyne, basically, which is based out of Norway, have created a little drone here, which is literally like that sort of size. It's a very, very small recon drone. It's been awarded a couple of contracts by the US Pentagon now. And if you want to have a look at it, then there's a video of it in here. So here we go. You can see there, it's really tiny. I'd actually like one of those anyway. I'd pack it in a bag, basically, and take it with me when I'm traveling. But the point of this one is when we think about the miniaturization of technology, but in this case, the miniaturization of drones, we have a long way to go. You know, there is absolutely no question in my mind that we will end up seeing drones that are the size of a grain of dust. So we can think of this in the same way we think of things like smart dust. So what happens when this is half the size, then half the size again, etc., etc.? How do you defend against these kinds of things? So you use an electromagnetic warfare gun. That's one of the answers, but actually I know how to defeat electromagnetic warfare guns. So any military people, maybe you want to talk to me. Or not. Sid, I think I could defeat most of your systems. That's a conversation in itself. Anyway, right, we've also just seen Anthropic. So Anthropic has launched Claude Sonnet 3.7. Now, suffice to say, basically, while it's a relatively big improvement, we've seen it improve in a lot of benchmarks. It's much better at what it does than a lot of the other platforms. This one comes with advanced reasoning. And that's really all I'm going to say about that, because increasingly all of these artificial intelligences are multimodal, they're agentic, they watch your screens, they help you automate stuff, they use advanced reasoning, hallucination levels start decreasing, IQs start going up, they generate lovely images, you know, all that sort of stuff, they generate great code. I mean, yeah, they're all kind of in the same race now. You know, it's a little bit like saying that Claude 3.7 Sonnet is a faster racehorse. Eventually, probably next week, it will get overtaken again by something else. And then as we sort of have a look on at some of the other latest AI developments we've seen, OpenAI, it's rolled out its operator agent across the world. So Operator is OpenAI's answer to Microsoft Recall that sort of watches your screen or your browser, learns what you do, watches what you do, and then helps you automate those particular tasks. So Operator is an agentic artificial intelligence, but it's not been rolled out everywhere because, especially in Europe, because of privacy concerns. So when we have a look at things like the EU AI Act, that is increasingly giving American headaches, or American firms headaches, which is why when companies like OpenAI are launching some of their new fancy products, you'll see them launched in the US and the UK first, a smattering of European countries, but generally 7 out of the 27 European countries, and then rather sporadically around the world. So that's it for today. So I hope you enjoyed this little joyride through the future. As I say, if you want to learn anything, if you want to learn more about any of the topics that you've actually sort of heard about, then you can go into the individual articles, you can click the tags, and you can dig through this site until your heart's content. And then, of course, if you are looking for a keynote speaker, if you are the senior leader of a large company and you would like to understand what the future looks like, what impact the future will have on your future operations, whether that's good or bad, then hey, why don't you give me a call? And then in the meantime, download the books, they're free, which is why I am not a best-selling author. So that's it from me. That's it. Thank you very much. Let me know what you think in the comments. Take care. Goodbye.